Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where it's the end of February, pretty much. And so it's time to talk about Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. Time to talk about your book club, Roger. So, in case you don't know, Roger's Cheap Old Book Club is a book club where Roger has chosen books for every month of this year that are all in the public domain. So if you want to read along with us, you can download a copy from Project Gutenberg and some other places probably for nothing. And, read the books along with me and Roger. And you can get physical copies of them, although some of them might be tricky to get. You might have to eBay a few of these, because some of the books in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, they're kind of obscure. But our first month, we read this. This is our February pick. This is The Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope. This is my old Penguin copy of Prisoner of Zenda. It has a still on the cover from the film. I think that film was from 1937. We just watched it, Roger and I did. And it was an excellent movie. It was great. And I really enjoyed the book as well. So let's talk about Prisoner of Zenda, the first book for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club that we read. So this was written by, I wrote some notes down so I wouldn't forget the dates. I like to forget dates. Anyway, this book was written by Anthony Hope, who lived from 1863 to 1956. And The Prisoner of Zenda was written in 1894 and was a huge hit. This was a bestseller and became a classic of literature. Now, it was so popular that it pretty much, it did spawn its own genre, which was a word I cannot say. It's the Ruritanian romance. This spawned the genre of Ruritanian romance. There were a bunch of books that kind of took the idea of adventures in an imaginary kingdom somewhere in Europe, which Ruritania is. This tells the story of an Englishman who's descended from Ruritanian royalty, and this is Rudolph Rasseldill, Rudolph Rassendyll. He's kind of a wealthy English guy, but he's kind of a layabout. He doesn't really have much purpose in his life. He's just kind of hanging out at his brother's house, not doing much. And he decides to go to Ruritania to see the place, And there, because he so closely resembles the king, he gets involved in all kinds of adventure. So this is an incredibly fun book. And like I said, the Victorians loved this book, and it became a tremendous success. It actually spawned a prequel and a sequel. So in 1896, there was a book called The Heart of Princess Ozra, which is actually the first book in the Ruritanian trilogy, even though it was written after this one. And I believe, I haven't read it yet, I believe it's kind of a book of connected short stories. And there was a sequel to this, which you'll find in this volume from Penguin, which was Rupert of Hentzau, which was written in 1898. I haven't read that one either, which is surprising to me now. I read this book originally years and years and years ago. And so it was practically all new to me now because it's been so long since I read it. Had a wonderful time reading this about the troubles in this mythical kingdom that does not exist. It's somewhere in Europe, that's all we know. And the king who runs into Rassendyll, and they're both surprised by how much they look alike. They're not completely identical, but they bear an extraordinary resemblance to one another. so that when the king is knocked unconscious by a drug and cannot go to the coronation, which will officially make him king, and if he doesn't go to this coronation, the vicious Black Michael, an evil Michael, it's an unusual thing, but it happens. The evil Black Michael, his brother, the king's brother, will become king, right? So Black Michael actually snuck this drug into the king's wine. The king likes to drink a lot. And so, you know, if the king doesn't show up at the coronation, Black Michael's going to become king. And even worse, the real king might eventually end up dead. You know, who knows what might happen to him. And so Rassendyll, being, you know, a decent fella, decides, okay, he agrees with some of the king's supporters and friends to impersonate the king. He will impersonate the king on the day of the coronation. And hopefully no one will get wise, and it'll go off, and then the king can take his place whenever the king wakes up. But, oh no! During the coronation, the king has been kidnapped. Kingnapped. He's been kingnapped. And Rassendyll is forced to keep playing the part of the king. And he falls in love with a beautiful woman who's engaged to the king. And it causes all kinds of romantic shenanigans. And it's just tremendously fun, this book. I had a great time with this. And it was even better than I remembered it being. Just fun, escapist adventure. It's really cool. It's like when Rassendyll gets to this kingdom, this mythical kingdom in Europe, he becomes a hero. The situation forces him to become a hero. You get the feeling that he always had this inside him to be a heroic character. And he really does. I mean, once he's there, it's like he was transported to a fairy tale type of place where, you know, swashbuckling sword fights happen and there's all kinds of chases and adventure and all kinds of other stuff going on. The villains in this are particularly good. There's two really good villains. There's Black Michael and there's the evil Rupert. And they kind of steal the show. Rupert steals the show. He doesn't show up until the latter half of the book, really. But once he does, yeah, he takes over as just a fun character that we love to hate. And it was great. From what I hear, the sequel isn't quite as good, but I've heard some conflicting things about that. So who knows? I'm looking forward to reading it. Don't know when I'll get to it, but I will get to it definitely, especially after reading this one. So I think, Roger, that your first book club pick was a winner. So good job on that. And like I said, this was available from Penguin Classics, but this is now out of print. There are some reprint houses that still publish this. I've been informed that Oxford still has an edition of this. I don't know why Penguin doesn't, really. This is such a cool book. And I don't know why it's kind of fallen out of popularity as far as classics are concerned. That will happen, you know. Sometimes a book is a classic for years and years and then just, you know, stops being one, apparently, for whatever reason. But this deserves that status, I think, because this is a book that is really good. It's a really good book. It's really engaging, really fun, and it holds up after all this time. This is just as readable now as it was when it first burst on the scene in 1894. And you can certainly see why it was so popular. And yeah, most of the people that read this for the book club seemed to have enjoyed it. I've got a Discord that I set up pretty much specifically to talk about the books in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, although you can talk about other things there as well. I'll link that down below if you're interested. Or, you know, you could always read these books and just comment on any video, really. I don't care. So this was fun. This was a fun book. For next month, for March, we are reading, and I already started it this morning. This is Forgotten Planet by Murray Leinster. Now, Murray Leinster was a science fiction writer who wrote a ton for science fiction magazines in the 20s, 30s, 40s. And he went on to write paperback books in the 1950s. And you will still see a lot of his stories in anthologies, but most of his novels and a lot of his work have just gone out of print. And so this book, which was published in the 1950s, and it's basically a fix-up novel of 3 long stories that were published, I think, in the 20s and 30s. I guess I could look. I guess I could actually look and check. Let's see. Does it even say? Yeah, 1926, 1927. The original stories were written. So this is basically a fix-up of stories that were written in the 20s. So the science is a little out of date. And this is a very pulpy science fiction story, as you might guess, actually, if you just take a look at the cover. I just started it and I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a good time with it so far. Our hero, Burl, has been attacked in the scene I was just reading by not just 1, but 2 giant spiders. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But what page am I on? What page am I on this book? 34. I'm on page 34. Again, this book is available from Project Gutenberg because it lapsed and went into the public domain. It's interesting how this has happened to some science fiction writers. At one time, for a long time, Murray Leinster was not a huge name, but he was, if you knew science fiction, you knew this writer, just because he wrote so much and his books were fun. But he's not Isaac Asimov. You know what I mean? He's not Arthur C. Clarke. He was a different kind of science fiction writer. And his stuff kind of, I guess, sort of fell out of favor over time. I don't know, but this is a book you can get for free on the internet, on Project Gutenberg if you want to. And it is our March pick for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. So I hope you join along with us to read this book and see what you think of it. Certainly the first book was pretty good, but we'll see. A lot of these books I'm either reading for the first time or they're books I read a long, long time ago. None of the books in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, I think, are fresh in my mind. Or like I said, a lot of them I haven't read at all ever. So it'll be fun. It'll be a fun experience. So join along with us. Join along with me and Roger. And I will catch you next time.